Hey everybody, hope you're having a good week. You may be thinking yourself why I'm actually in front of the camera rather than behind it. So in this video, we're actually going to do something a little bit different. We're going to basically go out trackside with me, and this time it's going to be a little bit twist. So in this video, we are going to see what it's like for me, or for you guys to see how it's like for me to see trains. So what we're going to do, we're going to head out trackside to different parts of the Chicagoland area, and while we're doing that, I'm going to be sharing some tips and tricks with all of you, and hopefully you'll get to see and understand what it's like how I put these train videos together. So without further ado, let's head out to the tracks. It's 5 o'clock a.m. on a Sunday morning, September 10th, 2023, as we go find some trains. I drove through the city of Chicago just before the sunrise, and it's always nice to drive through the windy city in the early morning hours before it starts to get busy later in the day. Our first stop takes us through Chicago as we begin our first stop in Chesterton, Indiana on the Norfolk Southern Chicago line. This line is former New York Central Railroad that starts in Albany, New York and heads westward into Chicago. This line is filled with various Norfolk Southern freight trains and some Amtrak trains, including the Capital Limited and the Lakeshore Limited. Now, I've always called the Lakeshore Limited the Late Shore Limited because it is always getting delayed getting into Chicago. We're at Riley's Rail House, which is a bed and breakfast place that I would highly recommend going to someday. It's got some vintage rolling stock behind the building, and right across from the tracks is a former restaurant that used railroad equipment. Now that it went out of business, these cars just happen to sit here. Chesterton is a very good hotspot for rail fans in the Northeast Indiana region, so I figured we start here and we work our way back. Now before the train started to show up, I figured I'd give you some time to show you what I film with. Here is a tripod that I use with tennis balls at the bottom for more stability. Now I film with my iPhone 14 Pro, and all the video work is done in iMovie straight on my phone. Now at the very top of this tripod that I film with, this is an iOgraphy universal mount and it works beautifully. Now the only downside to using this iOgraphy universal mount is that when I have to take my phone out, it happens to be a very tight fit and it's not very comfortable. Even though this thing is a little bit expensive, I'm still getting my money's worth. And for using additional shots, I do happen to use a second camera on hand. Here's my Canon Rebel T7 that I use for secondary shots, and I do use a second tripod for this one as well. Some of you may be wondering if I take photos while I'm recording video, and yes I do. I use a Canon Rebel T3i for photos. While it may not be the newest Canon camera, it still gets the job done for the most part. Sometimes when you're just starting a YouTube channel, I recommend starting out small and working with what you got. And slowly in time, work your way up whenever you're comfortable. But enough of that. Here comes our first train at about 7:30 a.m. and it was a westbound Norfolk Southern fast freight train with Norfolk Southern AC-44 C6M number 4109 leading the way. Once the train was off into the distance, it didn't take long for another train to show up. Here is Amtrak Capital Limited number 29 with Amtrak ALC 42 number 324 wearing the Amtrak Phase 7 paint scheme. The next train scheduled to show up was Lakeshore Limited train number 49. Before it was scheduled to pass, I decided to move a block or so westward to Porter Junction. This is where a few CSX freight trains and additional Amtrak trains pass through on the end of Chicagoland, which also makes this a hotspot. Off in the distance, I hear the Amtrak Lakeshore Limited number 49. Here it comes with P42 103 in front. Here comes another Norfolk Southern freight train, but this time it has a foreign leader up front. Here are two Union Pacific engines up front with a Norfolk Southern diesel just right behind it. I decided to stay for one more train at Porter Junction before heading off to my next spot. Here is a short Norfolk Southern freight train with another AC-44 C6M leader. Once the train clears, I'm back on the road for more trains. Next stop is Griffith, Indiana, which is close by the Indiana and Illinois border. This is former Grand Trunk and E.J.N.E. Railroad trackage, which is now owned by Canadian National. This is also a Railfan hotspot because the two mainline tracks cross each other. I heard a couple trains were coming by in a short matter of time, and I figured I'd stop by for a little bit to see what was going on. Here comes the first train I saw here. It's a Canadian National freight train with a former CREX or City Rail ES44AC trailing second in the consist. It's a long mixed freight train with lots of center beam cars at the end, which I personally nickname it the Center Beam Central. I heard another one coming, but turns out it had some vintage power up front, which ended up eventually being the highlight of the day. But more on that later. Before we headed off to our next stop, we headed a block east of Griffith to see another CN freight train take this different section part of the line. Here is the BNSF Chicago subdivision, or commonly known as the BNSF racetrack, which is our next stop on our list. Because of the variety trains race each other here, this easily makes this a hotspot for rail fans in the Midwest. Here you'll find Metro commuter trains, Amtrak trains, and various BNSF freight trains as well. We are set up in Hinsdale, Illinois, in a beautiful small downtown area, and I personally like this town because lots of friendly folks. Now here comes our first train that we see here in Hinsdale. Two older BNSF-9s in the Heritage 1 paint scheme. I've had the pleasure of seeing one of these in the lead before, so it's always a nice treat to see one again. Two of them, of course, is just an added bonus. Here is an inbound Metro commuter train that started in Aurora and heading towards Chicago Union Station. Here it makes a quick station stop in Hinsdale before continuing on its journey. This train had F40PHM number 186 and 189 for power. Something that's unusual to see on weekend trains here in the Chicagoland area is a Metro doubleheader. Usually this is done during big events in the city to accommodate more passengers. But I didn't bother that because I always like seeing these whenever I get the chance. Here comes another Metro commuter train heading towards me with F40PH 119 in front. It's one of the few engines that have the classic red and blue paint schemes that I grew up with, so it's always a nice treat to see these whenever I'm out trackside. After the metro train departed, it was time for lunch. I stopped at Egg Harbor Cafe with my friend Tyler Vershelden, and we had French toast there. It was wonderful. What better way to grab our lunch and just sit by the tracks while waiting for more trains? Now, whenever I'm out trackside, some of you ask who usually comes out with me. Sometimes I'm by myself, and that's okay. Other times, well, some of my crew members are there, as well as a few friends of mine who wanted to tag along as well. As long as I'm okay with it, I don't have a problem with it. So once we wrapped up lunch, we decided to wait on Amtrak California Zephyr number 5. It departs Chicago at 2 o'clock p.m. and we were expecting to pass us between 2:15 and 2:20 p.m. Right around this time frame, a BNSF westbound freight train was coming towards me. As it got closer, the main thing I was worried about was getting a blocked view of the Amtrak California Zephyr. Well, and the fact that there's 2 more open tracks available, anything's possible. So that's what I was a little bit worried about as the California Zephyr was getting closer. Now, thankfully, when the freight train cleared, I looked behind me and there was the Zephyr number 5 not far behind. It was running on time to its next scheduled stop to Naperville, Illinois, before continuing its long trip heading westbound. Once Amtrak 5 cleared Hinsdale, it was time to head back on the road again. After 25 minutes of driving, we decided to head to Franklin Park, Illinois on the Milwaukee District West Line. Here's an outbound Metro commuter train heading west towards Elgin with a former Amtrak Surfliner F59 PHI. When I arrived here, there was ongoing track construction going on at the crossing, but trains still managed to get through safely. Now, when that westbound commuter train departed, I happened to look to my left and I noticed something a little bit different. Here is a Metro ballast train just sitting here. And when I tried to get shots of it, little did I know that it would be perfect timing of it when track construction was done for the day and it was time for the train to head back eastward towards Western Avenue Coach Yard. Once they got the clear signal, the ballast train headed west to a switch, and once it switches tracks, the train would shove back towards Chicago. Now that the ballast train is off into the distance, here is a Canadian Pacific AC-44 C6M number 8054 leading a stack train into Franklin Park. Now, it was going real slow because of the restricting signal indication as it was heading into Bensenville Yard, but it's still interesting to note that I'm in the middle of witnessing the merger of Canadian Pacific and Kansas City Southern. I'm telling you right now, CPKC is still a hard name to wrap my head around. Now, just before I went to go check the tracks for any more trains, a familiar friend of mine decided to show up. Well, it's this guy, Aaron Gonzalez. Hello, Aaron. When the time Aaron showed up, it was around that same time for a cycle of commuter trains to show up. Now, once the commuter trains have cleared, a Kansas City Southern engine decides to lead a mixed freight train out of Bensenville Yard. While the lining may not have been the best, I do what any filmmaker would do. Just try it and see if it works. And it did. And as the train heads off into the distance, we would wrap up our trip out trackside in the Chicagoland area. But before we wrap up, there's one more thing I have to mention, which is picking the highlight of the day. Now, many of you have asked me over the years what goes into how I pick highlight of the day. Depending on what trains I catch along the tracks, I happen to pick one train that just stands out among the other trains that I've seen throughout the day. Now, there are many different factors when it comes to picking highlight of the day. It can range from a locomotive to a very friendly train crew. In this case, I was able to narrow it down, and you tell me in the comments if you agree with my choice. Highlight of the day that I picked was back in Griffith, Indiana, as a Illinois Central ST70 number 1001 led a mixed freight train. Besides the fact that there's another one just behind it, there was also a Grand Trunk Western locomotive third and two more Canadian National ST70 M-2s in the train. And in my eyes, this one really stands out. Well, I have to admit, I had so much fun going out trackside as usual, and not only we started from Chesterton, and then we worked our way towards Franklin Park, and we were able to make it home safely. And as you can see, I am comfortably home right now, in comfy clothes, and I couldn't be asked to be home safely. So, with that being said, I hope you all enjoyed the video, and hopefully you'll get to see a better perspective of what it's like for me to show you guys how I film trains from my perspective. This is a video that I've been never done before, so hopefully you all enjoyed it. So if you want to see more, or if you want to see something similar to this, please let me know right down there in the comments, and be sure to leave a like as well. And by all means, if you want to see more of our rare content, be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel and find us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and Snapchat. Until next time, my name is Andrew Mangalindan, and I'll see you along the tracks.